Alright guys, well, I thought I was done with this series, but I'm probably going to butcher this name, but Mohsen from Iran sent me a comment, and after I read his comment, he pointed out something very interesting, and I totally missed this on this project, and I thought it was a big enough issue that I would shoot a video doing a small refactor to fix the issue that he brought up. So the issue that he brought up is what we're doing is every time we do a find or a find first, we loop through and we construct the model object. And when we do that, it makes a database call to grab all the column names. That's not really a big deal when you have a small data set, but if you were building an application where you do a find that would include thousands and thousands and possibly hundreds of thousands or a million rows or something like that, it would be really slow because it would be doing a database call for each object in the loop. And you generally want to avoid doing a database call inside of a loop, especially if you can't control how big that loop's going to be. And so luckily there is a better option to this, and I'm going to show you. We're going to change 6 files, so it's going to be kind of a weird refactor, but it's going to avoid that database lookup. And luckily, since we're using PDO, they've actually, and I missed this in their documentation when I originally built this, so the things that I was trying to do by looping through all the column names and setting those properties, actually PDO will do that for us, and it's pretty cool and it's pretty easy, and I should have caught that in the beginning, but it's impossible for us to catch everything. So everyone give Mohsen, if I'm saying that right, I'm really sorry if I'm not saying it correctly. I can barely say my own name, so don't be offended. But Mohsen from Iran, everybody give him a big round of applause, a big thumbs up. He did catch a big issue here. So without further ado, let's jump in and fix this issue. So we're going to refactor 6 files. So let's just go ahead and get all the files open that we're going to need. So go ahead and jump into the app and go to lib and helpers and open the helpers.php file. And then go into the models, and we're going to open all 3 models that we have, the contact, users, and user session. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go to core, and we need the DB class and the model class open. Alright, and I even noticed here on the model I had a misspelling, but we're going to get rid of this anyway. I think what we're going to start with is let's start this refactor with, there's so many places we could start it, and there is a downside to this, and I'll get to that in just a moment, but for the most part this is the correct way to do it, so we're going to do it this way. Let's see here, the model class is a bigger refactor. Let's go ahead and jump into the database class here. And what we're going to do is, if you guys, let's see here, whoops, all right. So jump into the database class, and we are going to go down to the query function, and what we're going to do here is we're going to pass this query function another parameter, and we're just going to call it class, okay? And I'll explain why we're doing this in just a moment. So actually I'll explain it right now. So I'm just going to copy this line 35. Well, let's just let's create an if statement, and what we're going to do is say if class, so if class is not false, we're going to do something else, we're going to do something else, and what we're going to do is take this result line right here and we're going to put it inside this else. And this is how we're doing things right now. We're doing a PDO fetch object. However, the thing that I'm telling you that PDO does for us is it'll actually do the same thing for us. So this result equals this query. Oops. And we're still going to do a fetch all. But the difference is, instead of passing in the PDO fetch object, we're going to pass in the constant of fetch underscore class. Okay? Now you have to. What this does, instead of fetching an array of objects, it actually will construct each of the arrays into. It will construct each one of the results in the array to a class that you pass it. So we're going to give this a second parameter, and that is going to be class. Okay? So that's all we have to do in this query function. But we're going to have to change a lot of other functions in order to have this. So the next function down that actually calls this query function is this protected function here called read. So we're just going to add that third parameter there, call it class. And if you scroll all the way down to where you got to scroll down to right where it calls the query function, we're going to pass class along with it. Okay? The next thing that we need to do is we have to update the find and the find first to do it. So, and they're both going to be exactly the same, but in the find we're going to add an optional third parameter, and we'll give it false here, and then we will pass class right on down to the read function. And then right here in find first we'll do the same thing. Say class equals false, and in the read function we will pass that as well. Okay? Let's see if there's any more changes in this file. There are not. So this will be all the changes that we need inside of the DB function, or the DB class rather. So just to go through that a little bit, all we're doing is if we pass this class as a third parameter into our query function, if we ever do that, instead of returning our fetch object results, we're going to construct those classes. Okay, so that's that. Let's go ahead now and jump into the next hardest one, and that's going to be the model. Okay, so let me pull up my reference here so I can make sure I don't miss anything. This is somewhat of a big refactor. Don't be worried, we're going to lead you right through it. So the first thing that we're going to do is, this is the problem right here that was pointed out, is when this the models were being constructed, it was calling this set table columns. So it's running this function right here, and when it runs this function, it's doing this get columns, which runs db get columns. So that is actually the culprit and why this is a bad thing, because we don't know how many times this will be constructed. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to remove line 9, and we're going to actually get rid of this entire method. We don't need this set table columns anymore. And we also don't need this property of column names up at the top here. Okay. Then what we're going to do is we're going to jump down to our find method right here. So find your find method, find your find method, and what we need to do is just add in the result query here, right here we do the database find, and so we're going to give that the third parameter. So this is how we're calling what we set up in the DB class, and we're going to run a function called getClass. And normally what happens if I just leave this as getClass, this will return this parent model class, but that's not what we want. We want the child class. So in order to do that, we have to give this a parameter of this. Once you do that, getClass will return the class name of whatever class is called. So we're passing the class name into the find method. Okay? So I hope that makes sense. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to simplify this function a little bit, and we actually are going to get rid of this results array right there, and then we're going to get rid of this entire for each right here. And then instead of returning results, we're just going to return results query. Okay, so that method gets a little bit simpler. And then we also need to update our find first method to be very similar. So let's see, find first. So we need to pass the same thing. We're going to do get class and the parameter will be this again. And let's see, we're going to get rid of all of this here, and we'll just return result query, just like that. So that's everything in the find first. The next thing that we have to update is this save method here. And this is where it's going to get just a little bit wonky, because in the save function we were looping through our column names. Well, these aren't going to be set anymore. And it gets a little bit weird. We need to use a function that we can't call within model because it's going to be in the wrong scope. So to get around this, we're going to do something just a little bit bizarre, or it's going to seem bizarre. And what we're going to do is add a helper to our helper file. It's a really simple function, so let's go ahead and jump into our helpers.php. And down here on the bottom, we're just going to add a new function. And we'll call this saying get object properties. And it's going to take a parameter of object, and it's going to return get underscore object vars, which is a PHP function, and we'll just pass object into it, and that's it. This is basically a wrapper, and we're doing this so that we can call this outside of a we can call it from like the parent class, and it's going to be in the right scope. Okay, you'll understand this in a minute. I'll come back to it. But let's go back now, and I need to reopen my file here. Okay, so we need to actually go back to our model, and we're back here now in the save method. And what we're going to do is right here where this says fields equals an array, let's get rid of that empty array, and we're going to call our get object properties, and for the parameter we're just going to pass in this. Okay, and then what we can do is we can get rid of this entire for each, just like that. And let's see if there's anything else here that I'm missing. I don't believe so. So that's all we need to do in the save function. The next thing that we need to do is, and I don't think we're using this anywhere, but just in case we are, we need to update this data method, which is going to be super simple as well. But see it makes reference to column names, and we don't want to do that. So we're actually just going to call our get object properties. We'll pass in this, and then we need to do as column value. And then actually here, inside of this, we're going to say data column equals value. So that's all the changes we need to make in that method. I know I'm moving fast, but just work with me. The next thing the last method that we need to update here is this assign method, because this assign method is also used in that column's name, which we've gotten rid of. And so what we're going to do is we just really, only thing we have to change here is instead of checking this in array, we're going to do is use a different method or a different function that PHP gives us called property underscore exists. Okay, and what we have to pass in here is first the object you're looking in, and then the column name or the property name. So in this case, it's going to be key. So what it's going to do is it's going to look, does this have this key? So remember, assign, what it does is it loops through like post data and sets all of the properties to the post values. So so if property exists, then what we're going to do is we will put some brackets around that, and that's it. We don't need to change the assign function. Alright, so that's all the hard part of this. Now we just need to do some like Busywork basically, and it's not going to be difficult, but you're going to have to remember to do this for every model, because now we get into kind of the downside of doing this, and that's that we have to declare, instead of looping through and finding our column names, we're going to have to set those up in our models themselves. So right here we are in our contacts model, and we need to give it a public property for each one of our columns. So if you look in the database, we have ID, we have user underscore ID, we have F name, we have L name, we have email, we have address, we have address 2, we have city, state, and zip. I'm just going to leave it there. We'll say public. We have home, phone, cell phone, and work phone. There we go, and we'll just leave that deleted as 0 there. So that is all we have to do, I believe, in the contacts model. The next one that we're going to change is our user sessions. Although we never really set this up. However, just in case you do, we're going to go ahead and put those here. So this is, we would just add public, and these need to be public, and they need to have every column that's in your database for this. This one's going to be easy because it's just a couple, and the last one will be user agent. And that's it. So you'll have to do this at the top of each one of your models that you build in the future. Okay, it's not going to be difficult. Most frameworks make you do that anyway, but what this does is it allows our software to run faster because it's not going to have to do a database call to get this information. We're just telling it inside of our class. All right, I believe the last thing that we have to refactor is the users model, and there's a few other changes besides just adding those properties here. So what we're going to do here is add all of our columns. So we have ID, username, email, password, F name, L name, ACL, and then we also have deleted, and we're going to go ahead and set that equal to 0 there as well. Okay. Let's see. The only other things that we have to do in this users thing is because we're using the database find first here, we need to add our class name. So in this instance, we're just going to say users, and that's an uppercase U. And then here we're going to do the same thing. Okay. Let's see if there was anything else that I needed to do here. I don't believe so. Okay. I think we're done. So let's go ahead and just test some stuff. Make sure everything's working correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and log in here. All right, the login worked. So let's go ahead and go to our contacts. Yep, that worked. If you're getting errors, guys, just go back and look at the files that we changed. Look at them closely and make sure you don't have any typos. Let's try to add one. So we'll do Jane Doe. All right, that added that. I want to try something really quick. You remember in a previous video when we went to the add method or the save method, we added the 0 there. So let's see if we can do that without that. So go to the controllers and open up the contacts controller. And right here on the add action, let's just comment this line out, the contact deleted equals 0. I don't think we're going to have to use that anymore. So let's try another one, and I'm going to just say add contact. I'm going to name it delete me. Hit save, and absolutely that worked. Let's go back and just refresh. And yep, it's setting those zeros. The reason it's doing that is because in our contacts model, we gave that property a default value here. So this is going to be an easy way for you guys to set up your default values for any properties of an object. So we can actually go back now to our context controller and just remove that. That was bothering me anyway. I didn't like that we had to do that. So anyways, I think this is going to be a much faster application now that it's like that. And I just want to say thanks to Mosin from Iran for pointing this out. And Mosin, I'm really sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. I have no clue how to speak Iranian, whatever that is, language. So please don't be offended, but thank you so much for pointing that out. And I think this is a workable and viable solution to that. So at any rate, guys, I hope that helps. And as always, keep programming. Be more like Mosin. Try to find issues in the software. And I don't know if I'm going to keep making new videos to update stuff, but this was a big enough one that I did. But you guys feel free to update this stuff yourself. You know, I gave you a starting point, and you can keep building this framework as awesome as you'd like it. So at any rate, guys, I hope that clears up some things. I hope your application will run faster now with larger data sets. And have a great night.